let's focus down a little bit further, and rather than just super premium, let's look at luxury. So all luxury brands are super premium, not all super premium are luxury. So the index was created by using a definition of anything that sells for more than $50 a bottle or more at retail. Now, I know for a lot of the folks in this room, $50 a bottle or more doesn't necessarily sound like a lot. I know a lot of my colleagues at DISCUS would consider that a well brand. But at $50 a bottle or more, when you look at the average retail price of a bottle sold in the US, it's only like $17 for a liter. So $50 for a 750 is more than 3 times the price of the typical bottle. So $50 seemed like a very good price point. Additionally, when you look at those brands that sell for $50 or more, it accounts for only 3 or 4% of all spirits bottles sold in the United States. Now, while it's 3 or 4% across all spirits brands, clearly that's going to vary quite a bit by category. When we look at, say, American whiskey, where we've got a rapidly developing luxury segment, it's only about 2% of all bottles sold. It's also obviously a 28 million case category, I believe. Cognac, really the original luxury spirit, well, 30%, roughly 30% of those bottles sold are over $50. So across the country in 2020, we believe that around 105 bottles were sold at $50 or more, and consumers probably spent well over $10 billion. So at that, let's take a look first at the total luxury category. Now, what our index did is we went back to 2015 to really see how things had been growing historically. And then we also took a look at current trends, i.e., in this case, we had data through the middle of the year, so through the second quarter. So over the last 5 years, 2015 through 2020, luxury spirits have grown by 125%. That's amazing. They have a compounded annual growth rate of almost 18 percentage points. To put that into perspective, when we look at volumes for total spirits, yes, we've been growing very, very nicely, but volumes only grow by around 2.5, 2.5, 2.6% a year. So clearly the luxury segment is growing much, much more quickly. Year to date, so through the first half of the year, the results are even better. Volumes are up by almost 26%. So when we look at all whiskeys that fall into the luxury segment, that would be single malt Scotch, American whiskey, Irish whiskey, Japanese, though we don't look at it separately, there'd be Canadian. They grew by an average annual growth rate of a little over 11% over the last 5 years. Again, compared to the 2.5% growth rate that we've seen across really all spirits, that's more than 4 times the growth rate. This year, year to date, whiskeys are up 9.1%. Looking at a few specific categories, here I've taken a look at both single malt Scotch and American whiskey. The red bars are single malt Scotch. The blue bars are American whiskeys falling into the luxury category. Now, obviously, single malt Scotch has been around for a long, long time. It's a well-established category, and it's always been primarily at luxury price points. It saw nice growth from 2015 through 2019. Unfortunately, however, we got hit by some import tariffs, got caught up in a bit of a trade dispute, and that really caused volumes to decline a little bit in 2020. So the compounded annual growth rate over the 5-year period was only 0.5%, but it's a fairly well-developed category, and I'm happy to report that we've returned to growth in 2021, up about 5.6% year to date. Now, American whiskey, even though American whiskey is a large category, it's really in the last 5 to 10 years after we've seen a resurgence in bourbon, new interest in rye whiskeys, and the development of an American single malt category. The American whiskeys, it's a rapidly developing category of luxury brands. And they've experienced an incredible growth rate, over 40% a year over the last 5 years. Year to date, now obviously you can't grow at the rate of 40% forever, but year to date we're still seeing very, very strong increase of about 13.3%. Looking at Irish and Japanese whiskeys, now obviously Irish whiskey has been selling very, very well for the last 20 years now, and they've developed a nice luxury segment to go along with it. When you look at Irish whiskeys, their volumes have grown by a 14% annual compounded annual growth rate over the last 5 years. And so far in 2021, they're up about 8 percentage points. Now, Japanese whiskey, you go back 10 years and I bet most of the folks in this room couldn't name a Japanese whiskey. They've really taken off in the last 5 years. Almost all Japanese whiskeys are priced in that luxury segment. They've grown by over 40% annually as well. This year they're down a little bit, but I strongly suspect that that has more to do with transportation problems. I'm going to guess there's probably a lot of really good Japanese whiskey right now sitting on ships outside the port of Los Angeles. Once we get that problem solved, I suspect we'll return to growth. Cognac. Now, Cognac clearly is the original luxury spirit. It's what everybody talked about even in the 1970s. If you're going to have something really, really good, it was either single malt Scotch or it was Cognac. So obviously it's a well-established category, but even at that, over the last 5 years, the luxury segment has grown by almost 16% annually, and it's doing even better this year. Volumes are up 19 percentage points. And finally, if Cognac is the original luxury category, then clearly tequila is the new luxury spirit. It's only in the last 10 years where you've really had a lot of 100% blue agave products come on the market. It's only maybe in the last 10 years that people have said, you know what, I can do something with tequila other than just put it into a margarita. Like Japanese whiskey, like the American luxury category, it's a rapidly developing segment, and they experienced almost a 31% annual compounded growth rate over the last 5 years. This year, they're doing even better, up 40%. So, obviously, we all want a little luxury in our lives, and luxury spirits are doing extraordinarily well. We've got some wonderful panelists today. They're going to help us explore 3 categories: single malt Scotch, Cognac, and tequila. And I'm looking forward to what they have to say. At that, thank you.
Oh, I'm first.
You're first.
Excellent. So, hi everybody, I'm Raul Gonzalez. I'm Mexican, but I'm not talking about tequila. I'm going to be talking about single malt Scotch. And I'm going to take you through the journey of the Mcallen and our luxury journey, a journey that started 200 years ago, pretty much. 1824, that's when we got our distilling license. And since then, the brand has been in a journey to become the world's most valuable whiskey. So I was going through my archive trying to showcase a story of premiumization for Mcallen. And I think this is a very nice story over here. This is a Mcallen 1926. It was 60-year-old single cask bottling that retailed for $8,000 back in 1987. This bottle, we kept 40 of those and gave 12 labels to different artists to create individual labels for this same exactly whiskey. And 30 years later, they're starting popping up in auctions. A bottle of Valerio Adami auctioned for $1.5 million in Bonhams in 2018. The Dylan bottle was in an auction for $1.5 million in 2018 exactly. So you would say, wow, this artist really added value to the whiskey, right? Well, happens that same bottle that we sold for $8,000 back in 1987 sold in an auction in 2019 for $1.7 million, breaking every single auction record in history. And that helps us realize the value of the whiskey inside the bottle. It's the whiskey that makes the magic. And trying to put everything into a 10-minute or 5-minute overview of what makes it, I would like to start with three things. It's about values, it's about behaviors, and it's about fueling the dream. And it all starts with our values. Everything that we do in the Mcallen has to be anchored in values. From the mastering of whiskey making to our focus on beauty and everything we do, from the packaging to the natural color of our Scotch, the creativity of our executions, being anchored in our Speyside home state, and the uniqueness of our processes. Those are our values, that we don't move away from those. These values dictate our behaviors. Necessary excellence. We don't cut any corners. We've never been and we never will. We have a strong nature-inspired sustainability agenda and a community spirit. We're from Scotland. I'm not, but the company is. And we're always anchored in our roots, as well as the signature taste. The product has to taste like Mcallen, and is influenced by wine, sherry, or also sherry from Jerez de la Frontera in Spain. We always have our wood policy is very clear, and we're very understated. We tend to connect with consumers one-on-one. We're not a company that sponsors major events. We're more of a personal kind of brand. And it starts here. I mean, I said understated, and then I show you this picture. It's not really understated, but this is really the opening night of our distillery in Speyside in 2018. And this is the home of the brand. This is where everybody should once in a lifetime go and visit. And this is where we start the connection with the brand, with consumers around the world. From Dubai to New York, to Singapore, to travel retail, every single touch point has a distillery in the backbone. I will quote the Cognac world, but our chateau has to be there. So all the elements of the brand and the aesthetics are consistent through the line, from the distillery to the point of sale. So we have values, we have behaviors, we have aesthetic, and we have consistency. And you have to maintain it year over year over year. That is the foundation for the brand. Now, the more bottles you sell, the more you have to work on feeling and feeding the dream of the brand, working on the ethos of the brand. And that's where our products are very important. Continuous innovation. This is a bottle of Mcallen M in collaboration with Lalique. We have also a story of premiumization, like products like edition number 5. Just a quick note, when we launched editions back in 2015, we retail edition number 1 for $100. If you are lucky enough to find a bottle of edition 1 today at retail, it doesn't sell for less than $2,500. So it increased 25 times its price in less than 7 years. We have global partnerships that help us connect with other consumers across the world. We just announced our global partnership with Bentley, focused on sustainability. And we continually generate content that builds the brand world. Collaborations with photographers like Annie Leibovitz, for example, and our Masters of Photography collection. And our culinary world with the Seller of Can Roca in Girona, Spain, is I think the 3rd or 4th best restaurant in the world, in which we have the opportunity to bring food and whiskey in the same world. So if you see, is the brand aesthetics, is the values, the behaviors, but then the touch points, trying to find opportunities to connect with consumers in a very personal way. At the end, what we want is to bring this experience of the distillery, what you would experience if you visit the Mcallen in Speyside, to every consumer that we connect with through our brand ambassadors throughout the world. And that's what we do pretty much. We've been doing it for many, many years. And the secret is really to keep it consistent, be very personal, and really don't cut any corners. I brought a video, this is a 40-second video just to close, that showcases some of the creativity that we have built for the Mcallen in the past couple of years. And I pass it back to you, I think.
Actually,
Or should I play the video like
yeah,
that?
go ahead, play the video.
All right, let's see. These things never happen at the first click, but Maybe they work. Okay. No, that doesn't matter. I'll pass it on for you too.
Sure, you guys want, what's that? Okay.
Sure. Why don't you go ahead, Dia?
Okay. I'm probably grossly inept with this, but it's great to meet everyone. I am the CEO of Lobos 1707 Tequila and Mezcal. We represent I think modern luxury, right? A combination where we are rooted in history, but we are future forward in the way that we've approached the brand in terms of technique. We're relatively new, so we aspire and are inspired when I look at the heritage and history of what has been built with just an enormous brand like Mcallen. We are 6 months officially in terms of being sold in the United States, but we are triple our year forecast in 6 months, so we're off to a great start. And obviously, the tequila category increase has been extremely helpful during this time. Our brand launched with 4 expressions. The name Lobos means wolves in Spanish, and our founder family has been in the spirits industry for centuries in Spain. He is the great son of one of the 5 viceroy kings of Spain. And his family would go from Spain to Mexico in ships filled with sherry barrels, drink as I imagine one does on a 6-month journey or however long it takes to go from the south of Spain to Mexico, and then fill it back up with agave spirits and discover in the 1700s, hence the name 1707, what we know now is that the liquid became more incredible, the viscosity was affected through that process. So all of our expressions are finished in sherry barrels with the Pedro Jimenez finish, and our mezcal is as well. I am hopefully going to show you a video that shows a little about it. If not, I will tell you about it. Let's see.
Yes. Okay, there we go. Well, we think. There we go.
The tequila industry has been represented by a single face or a single name. But to launch Lobos 1707, we chose to shine a light on everyone behind our tequila and mezcal, and invite audiences to take part in our story by joining our pack. Introducing Build a Bigger Table. From the Jimadores to the distillers, distributors, bartenders, brand leaders, and even shareholder LeBron James, we created an integrated campaign that displayed everyone's contribution and welcomed others in. Our approach began with a social media pre-launch, which in itself was the sum of many parts. Rallying anticipation, this mixed media Instagram gave a preview of the 1707 brand as it was being developed. Once the moon phases aligned, our team embarked on a journey to Mexico, where we set out to capture a short film that told a true, authentic story of 1707. We also complemented the film with 4 additional liquid stories to focus on the individual variants. And for the first time ever in tequila history, starring the real Norris as the protagonist. Oh, and they're all brothers, by the way.
To me, it was super refreshing to work on a brand who actually legacy of the brand are real human beings.
Social influencer kits were created in the form of the Book of Lobos 1707. This limited edition books captivated and engaged artists, athletes, and celebrities, generating more than 200 million impressions. Post-launch, the Lobos 1707 saga continued through in-feed visuals that celebrated the team behind the brand, to unique stories that engaged their new pack members. And our efforts towards authenticity did not go unnoticed. I told it was the best tequila I ever had. Everyone's welcome, and it is not enough. And even still, our story's never finished. Legacy, love, Lobos.
Oh, mine's playing twice and can't get yours, but so, all right, so the short of it is, I grew up in New York, and at that time, in like kind of the late 80s and throughout the 90s, luxury all of a sudden became this like celebration of excess in an insane way. It was kind of, I kind of call it magpie syndrome, which if you guys know that bird, it's attracted to shiny things. It's a smart bird, by the way, but it was a time of luxury became conflated, I think a little bit with excess. And we now find ourselves really on the opposite side of that pendulum where the storytelling, the authenticity, integrity, and truth in and of themselves are luxury, right? And the way you receive information. But we were really thoughtful about when we launched this brand. One was that the thing that attracted me most to it was that we just had to tell the truth of the story of the history of the brand. as I'm getting older, my memory's getting worse. I was like, I can always remember the truth. That's very, it's very easy. And then two, we all, especially in this industry, right, we say alcohol is in our blood, but legitimately for this founder, it's in his bloodline, right? We have a lot of great founder stories that we look at, but it's a little different when he grew up. They actually sold barrels to Mcallen when he was a teenager in his bodega that he would run around in Spain. And it's difficult to fake or come up with on Madison Avenue a story that we've created. You just can't rival the legitimacy of the storytelling of an authentic family of real history and the care that I feel personally, as is our entire team, when we're like, well, we have this family's honor, right, that we take seriously. The name Lobos is his family's coat of arms. And I think we think about that as a badge of honor to work with a brand that represents, real people, real human beings, as was mentioned on the video. When we had our launch creative, a little bit of what you saw today, it was critical to us that we shared our authentic story about the liquid. And although we're very grateful to have these modern legends as luminaries behind us, like a LeBron James, like an Arnold Schwarzenegger, for us, bar none, and for them, the liquid is the real star. And when you think about what luxury means in 2021, it matters how you build your product. It matters how you build your team, your values that you actually stand for, and the transparency in messaging. And that's what has become luxury for us. We talked a little bit about our process, our system. I'm gonna skip to this. It seems to be slide askew. And I think, okay. As I mentioned earlier, these are our 4 expressions. We start off with a Hoven because, as I mentioned, we use the Solera system for consistency and ability to scale, and all of our expressions are finished in the Pedro Jimenez barrels. In that effort, it didn't make sense for us to come out starting with the Blanco, so we began with a Hoven, and we go to a Reposado. We just recently won double gold in New York Spirits. Our Extra Añejo is incredible, to the point that was mentioned earlier when there was a time when tequilas were only used for margarita. We actually very strongly say the only thing you should mix with our Extra Añejo is Friends. And then we just recently have begun to bring our Mezcal in, which I really encourage. We're thrilled about the opportunity here. Obviously, Mezcal and agave spirits generally are growing very rapidly, more rapidly than the category tequila at large, but of course, coming from a smaller base. Our founder was a bit of a master craftsman and went through over 300 liquid expressions until we got to this family. What he's done a beautiful job of with our Mezcal is honoring the soul. You feel like the volcanic pit, you feel the Oaxaca heritage coming through it, but it's aspirational and inspirational. It's both accessible and honoring the character. And for people who are experiencing kind of a violent journey on Mezcal, where one day it's amazing, the next day it feels like you're looking at a barbecue pit. This one, I think, lands in terms of perfect introduction of the beauty of what Mezcal is meant to be. So we're especially proud of that variant.
Thank you so much. Morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. My name is Derek Rudiger. I'm the Vice President of Brand Marketing on Hennessy, and real pleasure to be here along such esteemed brands to share a little bit about Hennessy and the journey that we have been on since 1765 to become one of the world's leading luxury spirits brands, not only as a global leader of premium spirits and value, but as the H in LVMH, something that we're incredibly proud of is really being one of the foremost luxury brands, even beyond the world of spirits. And it's funny, we talked a little bit at the introduction about the definition of luxury. And whenever I find myself talking about the brand through the lens of luxury, I always find myself coming back to the same place, and that's Google. I will quite literally, as I did last week, I really hope my boss isn't watching this, I will find myself Googling what is a luxury brand. And the reason I do that is because it's hard to find one common definition. And so in my mind, there are really 3 ingredients, and that's craftsmanship, quality, and connection. And that, in my mind, is sort of the lens through which I like to tell the story of Hennessy's journey. And the first is craftsmanship. At Hennessy, we've quite literally been crafting the future since 1765. It began with our visionary founder, Richard Hennessy, who was a celebrated Irish officer in the French army who settled in the banks of Cognac and began an eau-de-vie trading company bearing his family name. Over 250 years later, that pioneering spirit and that know-how that he began the company with has been handed down through 8 generations across 2 families. Of course, the Hennessy family, whose torch is now proudly held high by Maurice Hennessy, but also the Fiu family, who are the family of master blenders entrusted with crafting each and every one of our Hennessy cognac expressions. And they do that with exceptional savoir-faire. It's apparent in a number of the different parts of the cognac making process, but perhaps none more so than through the tasting committee. So every morning at 11 a.m. in Cognac, a 6 to 10 member panel of the tasting committee, led by our 8th generation master blender, Renaud Fiu, tastes between 50 to 100 eau de vie samples to determine which meet the strict criteria to become a Hennessy down the line in terms of both their aging and blending potentials. And it's perhaps this focus on craftsmanship and attention to detail that has allowed us to define the category for so long. The first cognac to create a VSOP in 1817, the Prince of Wales asked for a very superior old pale from the House of Hennessy. And in 1870, the original extra old cognac created by Maurice Hennessy to celebrate with family and friends. And hopefully it's no surprise that craftsmanship leads to what I personally view as the second ingredient of luxury, and that's quality. And I think that one of the things that we're most proud of as the world's leading cognac portfolio is what we are known for in terms of consistency and quality. And that starts with Hennessy VS, which is really our flagship expression here in the US and the bedrock of our business. And it goes all the way up the portfolio through VSOP, Exo, to our rare cognac collection, Hennessy Paradis, and Richard Hennessy, really the namesake of our founder. So craftsmanship and quality, they're two essential ingredients. But in my mind, luxury, you really need that third. It's what brings them together, and that's connection. It's that emotional connection, with your audience, with the consumer. And on Hennessy, we create connection in two ways, through culture and through community. Hennessy is always at the forefront of culture, be that in music, working with the likes of rising global superstar Maluma, or for over almost 10 years, having worked very closely with icon in and of his own right, Nas. In sport, Canelo Alvarez, on his quest to reaffirm his position as arguably one of the best pound-for-pound boxers in the world. And then sport, but beyond the actual world of sport with the NBA, whereas the official spirit of the NBA, we have a campaign that celebrates make moves that start movements. And it's all about those who are pushing the culture of the NBA beyond the court, including 8-time NBA All-Star Russell Westbrook. And lastly, and this really starts to get into the community piece, Asian American Pacific Islander celebration, working with Henry Golding to celebrate all things Lunar New Year and Mid-Autumn Festival with the younger generation of Asian American millennials. So it's about culture and it's about community. And I think this is probably what we're most proud of at Hennessy, which is that community is always at our heart. We have a long-standing history of investing in, being visible in, and supporting the communities that have propelled our brand into what it is today in the US market. And that continues today through the likes of the Hennessy Fellows Program, where we work with the Thurgood Marshall College Fund to create financial support and longer-term structural and mentorship support for graduates coming from historically Black colleges and universities, entering the corporate workspace. Really our efforts to help diversify the pipeline of talent moving towards the C-suite. Unfinished Business, which is all about supporting Black, Latinx, and Hispanic-owned small businesses who have been disproportionately affected by the impact of COVID-19. And then the Never Stop, Never Settle Society, which is an incredible initiative. It is an accelerator fund which supports Black entrepreneurs who are building businesses that are investing back into and supporting their own communities. It's a program that launched last year with a fantastic piece of work that I'd like to close with. Hopefully the video runs, because to me, it really demonstrates what we mean at Hennessy when we talk about creating connection through culture and through community. So we're going to see if it tees up here.
Dear Destiny, standing still.
Hennessy, never stop, never settle. That's our ethos. That's what pushes the brand forward. And hopefully today it gives you a little bit of a better idea of how we have become one of the foremost leading luxury spirits brands through those three ingredients that I talked about: craftsmanship, quality, and connection.
Excellent. Well, I think we've learned a lot. Now, just to sum up what I've heard here, it seems to me that luxury in the spirits world is created by a brand's history. It's created by the unique production process that it goes through. It's perhaps created by aging and ultimately, to a certain extent, the terroir of the brand itself. All this combines to create quality and exclusivity for the consumer. So I'm going to start off the questions. First one, Raul, single malt Scotch, like the various offerings that Mcallen puts out. Obviously, they have the advantage of only being made exclusively in Scotland to begin with, so that's certainly exclusive. And then they're made in specific regions. And then a single malt Scotch only comes from just, as it says, one single distillery. Now, clearly, the distillery itself will impart certain characteristics. The ground, the area will impart certain characteristics. But do you believe that the geographies themselves add to the brand's luster?
Definitely, I do. I'll give you an example. We have our distillery in Speyside, the Mcallen, and the drying process of the grain, the way we use wood, is very different from a distillery we have in Orkney, in the Orkney Islands, where we don't have any trees. So they dry their grain with peat. So it's a peated whiskey. Each distillery, forever, they've used whatever they have in their nature surrounding it for the production process, and that's what imparts the characteristics and the terroir to the single malt Scotch. Which same with mezcal. I mean, it's you use whatever you have at hand, and that's what really brings some of that terroir, that ethos of the place to the Scotch you're drinking. Even Scotch that is, if it's coming from the same still and you age it in different warehouses, they will develop differently with the change of seasons and the amount of the temperature changes. So definitely it has an important element in how the whiskey develops. Where do you distill it and age it?
So it sounds like the geography then dictated how the product was made in the first place, and you all have taken advantage of that geography, and you've kept the historical norms that in turn give you a very consistent product. Derek, quick question for you. So while Cognac obviously has many of the same advantages with regard to terroir that single malt Scotch has, Hennessy's advertising really appeals to a much younger audience. Does the historic significance of a brand translate across generations?
Yeah, we firmly believe it does. The historical significance is everything, and I think that it doesn't always just have to be the historical significance of the brand as it pertains to the founding story or the journey over 250 years. It's also the historical significance in terms of the role that it plays in culture. And an example of that on Hennessy is when I think about Hennessy Exo. So Hennessy Exo in the US has a very strong consumer foundation with an older Asian American consumer, where it's often seen as a symbol of status, success, and really of celebration, especially around key holiday occasions. But when it comes to a younger Asian American millennial consumer, what we've often found is that the brand doesn't always resonate quite the same way. And sometimes it's almost seen as my grandparents' drink. And while that might be an insight that some brands would see as dusty or a negative connotation, in our minds, it's one to be valued and cherished and actually celebrated. And what the XO team, I have a fantastic team leading Hennessy XO. What they've done is really take that insight and lean into it, working with some of sort of the hottest Asian American community leaders across the likes of art, cinema, fashion, food, to bring together these festivals and digital celebrations around Lunar New Year and Mid-Autumn Festival, two of the most important occasions in terms of holidays on the Asian American calendar. And really what it's done is it's allowed us to create this platform of celebration brought to the forefront by Hennessy Exo, that is a celebration of culture in a modern and exciting way that I think for what we found for this Asian American millennial consumer really allows them to see, their culture and their history and their roots celebrated, and to sort of flip this notion of my grandparents' drink from something that maybe is a little bit dusty to actually something that is, cherished and valued for inherently what it is. And in our mind, that is what we try to do. We are brand stewards. We work on brands that have been here long before us and will be here long after us. So it's really about being as relevant as possible to our audience and our consumers, but doing that in a way that fundamentally is rooted in and respects the rich history and heritage that we have on the brand.
So it sounds as if rather than using the history to bring people apart, you use the history to bring generations together.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exceptional. Dia. Lobos is a relatively new tequila, let's face it, but tequila itself has a very rich history. How does a new brand tap into the tradition of making tequila?
Yeah, I think it comes down to education. I mean, tequila, it's interesting. It's exciting to witness a reshaping of what tequila even means, right? So tequila had this undeserved negative baggage for many years where people really didn't understand the level of agricultural brilliance and craftsmanship and time and labor and love that goes into it. And I think a lot of what we've done is really almost like, reputational resurgence, right, as a category, right, to really understand what goes into it, which is why I think the history is actually critical, right? What's the legacy behind it? Even simple things like this doesn't sound particularly luxury, but one of our programs is Taco Tuesdays. And it sounds like, oh, that's very yes, I enjoy it at my home. So, but I didn't know any of this until we started to really research the history of it and come to find out it's pretty rich history about when the women from Mexico who led tacos in this country in LA were these entrepreneurs who had their own, these little kind of like tuk-tuks back then, if you will. And it was very game-changing for their families. And it was actually pretty revolutionary as women to become business owners in a new land. And it was a real bridge for future families, for future legacy, right? And it seems something as simple as like tacos, but again, there's nothing more luxurious than seeing where you came from and what we're standing upon. And I think tequila is finally getting the chance to show off and showcase like all the heritage and riches that goes into it.
Excellent. We've said for years that spirits are really an affordable luxury, but is the term affordable luxury an oxymoron? Anybody want to?
I don't think so. I think we all walk at this balance of as I mentioned earlier, inspiration, aspiration, right? And you think about like a Chanel lipstick as an entry point where like maybe you can't get a $10,000 purse, right? But you have a chance to access that craftsmanship and the integrity and that brand because you can afford a Chanel lipstick, right? I think the spirits give you that chance, right? Everybody, this is particularly now, I don't think it's puffery to say it, like we're living in like straight up historical times every day. Who knows? We were all probably like, what is shaking? We're all PTSD, right? Right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's ever important that you have a chance, when you have a chance to celebrate and be grateful for the moments, the little wins, you deserve like a premium luxury spirit. Nobody, like in these times, you definitely deserve it.
Let me just add that the on-premise plays a key role here because you can make a very expensive bottle affordable in a one drink serving. Sure. So the role that the on-premise has as a connection element of our brands with our consumers and having that moment, as you mentioned it, spot on. There's moments in which you have that moment in which you want to have one drink, you want the best. I think that you show it in your charts. People are drinking less but better, yeah. And that's going to be the case. And that's why you see products with provenance, quality, a story behind it. As we say, people drink the brand world. They don't drink the product itself. So if you can have access to that brand world in a 1 ounce serving, that's fine. That's your moment with the brand. You connect there.
That's a great point. I mean, we've often said that, we made the point about, perhaps you can't afford that $10,000 purse or the $20,000 watch, but you can certainly afford a $100 bottle of Scotch or Cognac or tequila or whatnot. But then I never thought of it that way, or well, when you bring it on premise, well, maybe you're only paying $15 or $16 for the glass as opposed to $100 for a bottle, but it makes it that much more affordable and it introduces somebody and it gives them that connection. That's a really good point. Okay, one other question. So how do you keep a brand exclusive? Well, you've had a lot of experience with this as well in your past role. How do you keep a brand exclusive but still sell several 100,000 cases a year?
I mean, I think that, I talked a bit before about connection. And in my mind, exclusivity is one of the ways that you can create connection, but it's also not the only one. I think within your portfolio, you can have more exclusive offerings than others. But, I also think that exclusivity is only one way that you create that connection and sort of drive that luxury positioning. I think about, I'm a big sneaker fan. And I think there's something to be said about getting a pair of sneakers that are exclusive that, not everyone can get their hands on, but you might feel just as strongly about that pair of sneakers that maybe it was the same pair that you first got in high school, or they're the pair from your favorite athlete. You might still have that same emotional connection as one that, maybe there's only a handful of pairs out there. And that's sort of the way that I think about exclusivity. There's the portfolio piece in terms of which offerings are more or less exclusive, but then from an overall brand, it's, in my mind, you can play the exclusivity lever, but in my mind, it's only one of the ways that you can build that connection that creates more of a luxury world.
I would just add, I wouldn't call it exclusivity. I would say that you can only extend your brand's reach if your brand is powerful enough to sustain the amount of consumers enjoying that brand. So if your brand has a strong ethos, the dream of the brand is strong, you can have more people joining the brand. But if the brand extends and you don't build that luxury halo on top of it, every bottle that you sell of your product dilutes your brand dream a little bit. Sure. So you have to refuel the dream through innovation, through collaborations, through everything to get people to still aspire to drink your product. And that's, I think, where the investment in the brand and the consistency of the message is super, super important. But, we want more people to enjoy our products. We just want to make sure that we can sustain the equity of the brand to get more people to join us.
Okay. One last question from me. Actually, it's going to be a two-part question, so everybody pay attention.
Okay.
And then we'll open up to the audience. So while we talk about premiumization trends today, premiumization has actually been around for a long time. I mean, I don't have much of a life, and I've actually gone back and looked at some of the literature from the 1970s, and people talked about premiumization back then as well. So sometimes today's luxury becomes tomorrow's standard. So given the consumers, so two questions here. Given the consumers' seemingly insatiable desire for more exclusive products, should we consider drinking spirits aspirational? And if so, are cocktails just as much art as they are beverage? Is drinking a luxury spirit more of an experience rather than just consuming something?
Yes and yes. I mean, it's simple. It's clear that consumers are drinking less and better. Yeah. It's clear, especially in these days, that love the building a bigger table approach. It's like it's about reconnecting. So drinking a Scotch with a friend is a luxury on itself. Like, finally, we're able to reconnect with our consumers and get people to connect to each other, talk to each other. Being here feels amazing. So definitely, yes, there's an element of luxury, the luxury of a moment. We have learned to enjoy a moment more and more after the last 2 years. And definitely the role that the spirit plays is that element of connection that people are craving for,
I was just going to say, it's a really good point, and perhaps that we've really learned to enjoy the moment more, and perhaps that explains some of the explosion that we've seen and luxury spirits over,
Yes.
we're sustaining 25% growth, which is incredible.
No, I think when we talk about today's luxury being tomorrow's standard is also highly reflective of an attention issue, right? So we live in such a hyper customization world that it's difficult, whether it's in personal relationships with your brands, to retain the same. People are losing value because you're losing attention, which is why I do think the opportunity and things. Both of you guys have great examples of brands where you constantly find ways to reinvent, to reintroduce, to borrow equity from brand partners, from art, from cinema, from, whether it's the way you package, whether it's a new liquid infusion, whether it's a way to lean on cocktail culture to reintroduce your brand is really important when you are literally fighting with people who often have 3 to 4 screens. How does your one brand for one specific occasion in 24 hours of consumption, right, break through? I think it's much more important than it was 25 years ago to be really thoughtful about what are you doing for an LTO? What are you doing different? What new message for medium? How often are you having requited, respectful conversation through your content? I think those are the difference maker to keep your brand steady and interesting for the long term. And in terms of cocktail, I think it's a combination of both. I'm old fashioned in the way that I do think people still care that when you taste something, that actually is not just only beautiful, it's also incredible, right? So I think you always have to, anything, as we are in the ingestible business, if you will, not a cannabis panel, but I think it's important that, brand still matters. Nothing can be, I think, beautiful enough to be consumed for long if it isn't actually a wonderful experience.
And that to me is I think you touched on it and you started with it. It's about experience. I think we work as luxury spirits in a business that is, yes, of course, it's product, but that product is consumed almost always in a setting that is an aspirational experience, whether that's with family or friends, even solo, to cap off a long week, whatever it is. I think there's an emotional experience that comes with, the industry that we're in and the products that we have. And that, to me, is sort of the beauty of cocktails. You think about if you go to a restaurant, there's no better place to sit at than at the chef's counter. And when you're at a great cocktail bar, I mean, literally, that's what it is. You're at the chef's counter. You see craft at play right in front of you with beautiful product. And I think that experience is what makes, I think cocktails part science, part art, and fully an experience that is aspirational in a luxury setting.
Part science, part art. I love it. Do we have time for some questions now, Lisa?
We're at the end of the session. If there are a few questions, we can take them very quickly, or else we can grab one of the speakers afterwards.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Anybody? Raise your hand and we'll bring you the microphone. Yes.
Only if we have time.
Yes.
Thanks. Thank you guys for your insights. Super valuable session. Talking about the definition, the ever-changing definition of premiumization and luxury, and you each having a pulse in the luxury of spirits, what do you foresee as like that next definition for those crossing over the legal drinking age now, Gen Z and beyond? Any changes?
I think, again, experience becomes critically important. Transparency is, as you guys know, probably more than most people, understanding they can follow, from origin, from seed to store or seed to their kitchen, if you will, for lack of a better, is really becoming more and more important. If you can indulge me one quick second, it'll make sense. I was privileged to be in a moonshot factory in Barcelona about education. And they talked about the luxury of the future of education will be having human teachers. Real teachers in real life will become a luxury, right? I think that how that pertains to our industry is people understanding the human being presence from the beginning. Here's the actual people who are involved. Here's the people behind your brand. Here's the values that you espouse. When you talked about exclusivity, at Lobos, the only thing we're exclusive about is if you don't mirror our integrity and values, we welcome please not to join us, right? So I think that's actually becoming more important as you look at Gen Zs now are 24 and 23. All the research bears that out.
I would just add, I think the key word is authenticity. Just new generations, they have all the information in their hands. They have a radar. They know when somebody's trying to bluff them. So being authentic, being transparent, that's what for them represents that luxury, knowing where the product is coming from and knowing the story behind it.
Excellent. Do we have another question? Maybe we have time for one more. Yep. Seeing none. Well, I want to really thank the panel for being here. I think we had a fantastic discussion. Let's give them a big hand. Thank you.